They gave him the horse as a joke, a sway-backed old gelding ribs, showing too tired to run and too stubborn to die. The ranch hands laughed, certain the poor cowboy would give up, sell it for scraps, or break under the weight of the insult. But instead of walking away, he brushed the dust from its coat, whispered something no one else could hear. And from that moment on, the story of the worthless horse would become the most astonishing chapter Dusty Creek had ever seen. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe. The town of Dusty Creek, Arizona lay shimmering beneath the sun of a late summer afternoon. The kind of heat that baked dust into every crease of a man's boots and turned the sky a merciless sheet of pale brass. It was the dry season when rain clouds stayed far over the mountains and the desert wind carried only heat and grit. But this week, the town was alive. Banners of red, white, and faded blue hung from windowsills and nailed-up poles flapping against the boards of weathered storefronts. Rough-cut grandstands had been hammered together along the edge of the main street, the wood smelling fresh and sharp under the sun. A broad corral was fenced in for the rodeo, the largest event of the year, where horses would run, bulls would buck, and wagers would fly faster than dust devils across the desert flats. Merchants rolled in with carts of leather tack and tin pots. Women set pies on cooling racks along open stalls, their crusts steaming golden in the heat. Children ran underfoot, weaving between wagon wheels, chasing each other with sticks, shouting about cowboys and heroes they had never met. The air was a heavy mix of smells: sweet roasting corn horse sweat, fried dough, fresh oiled saddles, and the dry tang of dust. Everyone from homesteaders in patched overalls to gamblers in silk waistcoats had gathered in Dusty Creek for the rodeo. And everyone knew that McGraw Ranch, the largest spread in the county, would send its riders. The McGraw name carried weight, whispered with equal parts envy and resentment. Clint McGraw's herds grazed across thousands of acres. His word could shift prices, sway sheriffs, and ruin smaller ranchers in a season. To some, he was a pillar of the territory. To others, a shadow across it. Clint McGraw himself made his entrance as the sun climbed high. He came riding down the middle of the street like he owned not just the town, but the ground it stood on. His stallion, a tall sorrel with a mane as red as rust, snorted clouds of dust with every step. Behind him rode three of his hands, hard men with narrow eyes, spurs that jangled against stirrups, and the lean look of loyalty bought by coin. The crowd parted without needing to be told a hush, falling even through the noisy market. McGraw didn't wave or smile. He looked straight ahead, a man accustomed to having eyes on him. His coat was cut from finer cloth than most men in Dusty Creek had ever touched his boots, polished so bright the sun caught on them. He reined up in the center of town in front of the registration table, where cowboys queued to sign their names for the rodeo contests. His voice cut across the street, deep and heavy, seasoned with authority. Ethan Cole heads turned. Some people frowned, others smirked. A lanky young man near the edge of the line straightened, lifting his hat against the glare. Ethan Cole had the look of a cowboy who had worked too many fences for too little pay shirt, faded thin at the shoulders, boots, cracked hat brim, slouched from sun. He made his living drifting between small ranches, mending wire branding calves, breaking broncs for a few dollars when someone needed him. Nobody expected much of him. Nobody gave much either. McGraw raised a hand, signaling the crowd closer. "Gather around, folks, I've got a gift for our newest competitor." His tone carried amusement, the sly kind of humor that drew others into the joke before they even knew what it was. People pressed in. Men abandoned their beer mugs on railings, women pulled aprons tight across their waists, and children scrambled up barrels for a better view. Ethan stayed where he was, brow furrowed, unsure whether to step forward. McGraw's grin was a slash beneath his mustache. A cowboy's only as good as his horse. And seeing as young Cole here hasn't got one fit for racing, I thought I'd remedy that. He snapped his fingers. One of the ranch hands disappeared around the corner of the livery stable and returned leading a horse. It was no gift. The animal shambled forward, ribs showing beneath a coat of dirty gray that might once have been silver. Its mane hung in snarled ropes, its hooves cracked. The horse limped on its left hind leg, each step slow and stiff. An old cracked saddle was strapped across its bony back, the leather torn and patched with rough twine. The bridle was little more than a strip of rope knotted through a rusted bit. A ripple of laughter broke through the crowd. Whistles followed. Someone clapped mockingly. "Hell, McGraw," a man shouted, "you couldn't find a mule." The horse shook its head, weakly, dust spraying from its mane. Its eyes clouded, but still holding a faint glimmer, scanned the street as though searching for a memory it had long since lost. "Here he is," McGraw declared. "A fine mount for a fine young man. Dusty Creek deserves a show, and I aim to give them one." The laughter swelled. Billy Joe, a broad-shouldered drifter with a crooked grin and pockets full of other men's money, cupped his hands around his mouth. "Ethan Ride, that bag of bones. And you'll be slower than a preacher on Sunday," Pete, his scrawnier companion with eyes always on the betting tables, chimed in. "Best hitch it to the garbage cart. Cole might haul a few pennies that way." The crowd roared. Even men who had little love for McGraw joined in, swept along by the humor of it. Someone slapped a wager down, right there on the barrel beside him, betting Ethan wouldn't last through the week, let alone the rodeo. A few more followed, coins, clinking, laughter rising. Through it all, Ethan said nothing. He walked forward with steady steps, hat pulled low, jaw set. The laughter seemed to break around him without touching. He reached the horse, and for a long moment, he simply looked at it. Up close, the animal's breath was shallow, its flanks trembling faintly with effort. Old scars traced lines across its shoulders, and the faint stink of overwork hung about it. Ethan lifted a hand and laid it against the horse's neck. The hide was warm, the pulse beneath it slow but steady. The horse flicked an ear, and for the first time in who knew how long, stood still. Ethan leaned close lips, moving in words no one could hear. Then he straightened, turned his gaze on Clint McGraw. "Thank you," he said quietly, voice carrying despite its softness. "I don't think he's finished just yet." The laughter faltered, some men blinking as though they hadn't heard right. Ethan gathered the reins and clicked his tongue, guiding the horse gently. He ignored the jeers, ignored the bets, ignored the smirks. He simply led the animal through the crowd as though walking away from a storm. Clint McGraw watched him go, a thin smile curling at the edge of his mouth. He leaned toward the ranch hand at his side, speaking just loud enough for those nearby to catch. "If he's fool enough to ride it, that'll be entertainment worth more than the prize money." The ranch hand chuckled, and McGraw turned his horse, disinterested already. To him, Ethan Cole was no rival, merely a flicker of amusement in a dusty afternoon. The crowd dispersed, still laughing, still talking wagers. For most, the show was over, yet not everyone laughed. From the far side of the street by the stone well where horses were watered, Abigail McGraw had been watching. She stood in a riding skirt of dark green hair pinned beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Unlike her father, her presence did not command silence, but it drew eyes all the same. Many men in Dusty Creek had noticed her, though few dared speak more than pleasantries under Clint's gaze. When the gray horse was led into the sun, her breath caught. Her hands tightened on the rim of the well until her knuckles blanched. The limp, the scars, even under the dirt, she knew them. "Dust devil," she whispered so low, only the stones beneath her heard. her eyes filled with a mix of recognition and sorrow, memories crowding close. Years ago, before her mother died, before the house at McGraw Ranch fell silent, there had been a horse like this, swift as wind across the plains, loyal as shadow. Her mother's horse, the one Clint refused to look at after loss, tore through the family. Abigail's throat ached. To see him now reduced to a mockery, handed out like trash, it lit anger beneath her ribs. Yet, she said nothing. Not yet. She only watched as Ethan Cole walked away with the horse's back straight, his step quiet. Ethan kept walking, leading the animal away from the center of town, away from laughter that still echoed behind him. The heat shimmered on the boards of storefronts, on the iron rims of wagons. He did not look back. The sun angled west, casting long shadows across the dirt street. One of those shadows stretched ahead of him, tall and gaunt, the shadow of a man, with little more than pride left to his name. Beside it limped another thin, weary, the outline of a horse half forgotten. Together, they moved toward the edge of Dusty Creek, where the noise of the rodeo faded and the sound of cicadas rose from the scrub grass. Ethan Cole guided the weary horse along the rutted trail, the sun slanting low behind the ridge. Ahead, nestled near the tree line where the scrub oaks thinned, and a dry creek bed cut across the land, stood a small wooden cabin. The boards had weathered to the color of ash, patched in places with tin. A stone chimney leaned slightly from years of heat and wind, though it still carried the faint smell of smoke. The cabin's porch sagged under its own weight, and weeds pressed up through the hard-packed dirt yard. This place was no ranch house, no proud homestead. It was a shelter that clung to the edge of survival, much like the people who lived in it. Behind the cabin stretched a patch of rocky ground, the remnants of what once had been a corral. Most of the rails had collapsed under winter snows the year before, leaving only a scatter of broken posts. Beyond that, the land gave way to stones and brush a trickle of water glinting in the sun, where a creek once ran strong. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. The town was hidden now, its noise only a memory. Here in the hush of evening, the world seemed stripped down to its bones, poor, quiet, but steady. The horse plodded beside him, hooves crunching through brittle grass, and Ethan found a strange comfort in the silence. Inside the cabin, Martha Cole was stirring a pot on the iron stove when she heard the uneven clop of hooves in the yard. She wiped her hands on her apron, pushed the door open, and stepped onto the porch. Her figure was lean, carved by years of hard living. The lines on her face spoke of both hardship and resolve. Martha had raised her son alone after her husband died in a mining accident. And though the years had left her shoulders narrow and her hands calloused, her eyes still carried the sharpness of a woman who had weathered storms without bending. When her gaze fell on the gray horse limping beside her son, she froze. Her mouth tightened, her brow furrowed. "What in God's name is this, Ethan? She asked, her voice low but edged. Ethan stopped a few feet away. He pushed his hat back and wiped a sleeve across his face streaked with dust. "It's a gift," he said. "From Clint McGraw." Martha's expression darkened. She let out a sound that was half a laugh and half a scoff. "A gift, no, son. That man doesn't give gifts. This is an insult wrapped in rope. A joke at your expense." Ethan's jaw worked, but he only gave a small shrug. "Maybe so. But it's mine now." Martha's eyes lingered on the horse, the jutting ribs, the limp, the look of something cast aside. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She turned back into the cabin without another word. But Ethan caught the mutter under her breath, "Lord help you, boy." With the last light slipping away, Ethan set to work. He gathered old boards stacked behind the cabin remnants from a fence long since fallen, and dragged them to the side of the dry creek. A roll of canvas, patched and stiff with age, was hauled out of the shed. Piece by piece, he rigged up a makeshift shelter, driving posts into the dirt, with the flat of an axe stretching the canvas across the frame. It was crude, but it would keep the night dew off. He found a coil of rope and strung a line around the area, fastening it to old stumps and leaning rails, forming a pen. From the porch, his mother watched silently, arms folded. She had seen Ethan work this way before. Quiet, steady, never rushing, but never stopping until the job was done. At the creek's edge, Ethan filled a wooden bucket with water that seeped from the stones. He carried it to the horse, who sniffed cautiously before lowering its head to drink. From his pocket, he pulled the last coins he had left, the remainder of wages earned mending fences. And later that evening, he walked to the general store to trade them for a small bundle of hay and a sack of oats. It emptied his savings, but when he returned and spread the hay in front of the horse, he felt no regret. Martha appeared with a small wooden box. She opened it, revealing bundles of dried herbs, their scent earthy and bitter. "This is all I've got left," she said. "For rubbing joints, use it sparingly. If the animal can even stand it, might ease the pain." Ethan nodded and accepted it, grateful but wordless. That night, with the cabin dim under the glow of a single lamp, Ethan took a lantern to the shelter. He wanted to know what kind of horse he had been given, what story lay written in scars and bones. He moved slowly, letting the light fall across the gray coat. His hands traced the hide, finding the ridges of old wounds. Along the shoulder, 3 white scars, cut deep like claw marks. Across the ribs, faint lines told of ropes and strain. He lifted a hoof and saw the edges worn thin, the kind of wear that came from long miles over hard earth. On the left shoulder, there was a hollow, the mark of an injury long ago poorly healed, leaving the muscles sunken. Yet when Ethan met the horse's eye, he saw something different from weakness. The gaze was tired, yes, but not broken. There was still watchfulness there, a spark that had not been beaten out. Ethan set the lantern down and stepped back. He let out a slow breath, as though he had read a story no one else in town cared to read. Later, he brought a dented tin pail into which he poured oats mixed with a handful of hay. He set it before the horse and stood aside. The animal did not move at first. Its ears flicked back, nostrils, flaring eyes roaming the shadows, as if expecting the whip or the boot that usually followed food. Ethan did not push. He lowered himself onto a stump a few paces away, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice came quiet, softer than the evening wind. "No one's going to beat you here," he said. "Not anymore." The horse twitched, head still high. Minutes passed. Then slowly, cautiously, it dipped its muzzle into the pail. The sound of chewing, measured, hesitant, filled the silence. Ethan allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Inside the cabin, mother and son sat across from each other at the table. A pot of barley soup steamed between them, and cornbread lay on a cracked plate. The glow of a single lamp threw shadows across the wall, shadows that seemed to breathe with the quiet of the room. Martha broke the silence first. "Ethan, you don't have to carry this burden. You don't need to prove yourself to that man or to anyone else in that town." Ethan tore off a piece of bread, chewed slowly, then answered, "It isn't about them. It's about me. And..." He paused, eyes flicking toward the window where the gray horse stood beneath canvas. "And about him." Martha's gaze softened. She leaned back, folding her hands. "Then remember this. Honor can mend what pride alone cannot. But anger only deepens the wound." Ethan looked down into his soup, letting her words settle. He didn't answer, but she saw the tension ease in his shoulders. Much later, when Martha had gone to bed, Ethan sat on the edge of his cot. He opened a small leather-bound notebook worn from years of scribbles and drawings and took up a pencil shaved to a stub. He wrote day 1, slight limp in hind leg, eats without resistance after waiting. No signs of aggression. On the next page, he sketched a rough outline of the horse, noting scars, marking the hollow shoulder with careful strokes. His handwriting was plain, but it carried the patience of someone who meant to understand, not just to record. The lamp flickered with the draft, and outside coyotes sang faintly in the hills. Ethan closed the book, set it beside him, and lay back. For the first time in a long while, he felt a weight lift, not gone, but shifted as though shared. Dawn came gray and cool, the ground still damp with dew. Mist clung to the tops of the mesquite and drifted low across the dry creek bed. Ethan carried a bucket of water and a bundle of hay toward the shelter boots, crunching softly. The horse lifted its head at the sound of his steps. Instead of flinching, it gave a soft snort, ears pricking forward. Ethan set down the bucket, reached a hand toward the muzzle. This time the animal didn't shy away. It leaned slightly, pressing into his palm with surprising warmth. Ethan's throat tightened at the gesture. He stroked the gray muzzle gently. "That's it," he murmured. "We'll manage you and me." From the cabin window, Martha watched. The hardness in her eyes eased as she saw the horse turn toward her son, not away. She exhaled slowly, the faintest trace of a smile touching her lips. The sun crested the ridge, then spilling light across the clearing, catching on the thin gray mane of the horse, and the quiet determination in Ethan Cole's face. The cabin at the edge of Dusty Creek had seen many mornings, most of them the same. But this one carried something new, a beginning. The sun was already slanting toward the horizon when Ethan knelt by the stream beside the cabin, a bucket of water steaming faintly in the chill air. He held Dust Devil's forelegs steady, pouring the warm water across the cracked, swollen hoof. The horse twitched, but didn't pull away as if too tired to fight. Ethan worked quietly, his sleeves rolled, his brow furrowed in concentration. From the trail came the sound of hooves, slow, deliberate, the creak of old leather in rhythm with each step. Ethan looked up. An old man on an Appaloosa gelding was riding down the path. The rider sat straight despite his years, a wide hat shading his weathered face. When his eyes fell on the gray horse tethered near the shelter, he drew his reins sharply. The Appaloosa halted with a snort. The man swung a leg over and dismounted. His boots hit the ground with a solid thud. He stood for a moment, staring hard at Dust Devil, his expression darkening. "Young man," he called, voice gravelly but firm, "do you know what horse you've got there?" Ethan wiped his hands on his trousers, wary. "Just a worn-out gift from Clint McGraw. That's all I know." The old man's jaw set. "Gift, eh? More like an insult. That horse isn't just some broken-down nag. That's Dust Devil Prescott's speed champion more than 10 years ago." His eyes narrowed as memory sharpened. "I ought to know. I lost to him in the finals. Best run I ever rode, and still he left me half a second behind." Ethan blinked. "Are you sure?" The man stepped closer, pointing to the horse's shoulder. "That scar there along the left side, see it? He got it clipping the rail on the last barrel turn that night. Folks thought it would slow him down, but he ran through it and took the prize." For the first time, Ethan's guarded calm faltered. He looked at Dust Devil with new eyes. The man extended a hand. "Name's Hank Dawson. Used to ride the circuit back when my knees still bent proper." I never forgot that night. They sat on overturned crates beside the corral while the sky deepened into violet. Hank lit a pipe, the smoke curling into the cooling air. His voice took on the steady cadence of a man speaking from memory. That horse once belonged to Lorna McGraw, Clint's wife. She raised him from a colt, trained him herself. Folks said she had a gift with horses' soft hands and a heart that made even the wild ones gentle. Every evening you could see her riding Dust Devil across the ridge. Fastest thing on 4 legs, but only when she was in the saddle. For her, he'd give everything. Ethan listened quiet, his hands resting on his knees. Then she took sick. Hank went on the weight of old grief, roughening his tone. Fever struck sudden, burned hot and cruel. She was gone in a week. Clint, well, he changed after that. Went cold. Didn't want reminders around. Couldn't stand to look at the horse she loved most. 2 months later, he sold Dust Devil to Jed Baker, the blacksmith. Hank spat into the dirt. Jed used him hard. Hitched him to carts, wagons, hauled timber and coal up and down the canyon for 3 years. And Jed wasn't the kind to spare the whip. A champion dragged down to a drudge. I saw him once pulling a load of iron so heavy his knees shook. Broke my heart. He drew on his pipe, the ember glowing. That horse isn't just an animal, son. He's a legend. Only difference is somebody tried to bury that legend in mud and chains. Ethan felt the words sink like stones. He glanced at the gray figure in the pen ribs, jutting scars bright against faded hide. Somehow knowing the truth only made the sight more painful. That night, after Hank rode off into the hills, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his notebook open. The lamplight flickered as he flipped through the pages, scanning the notes he'd made on the horse's gait, the wear of his hooves, the placement of scars. Everything Hank had said matched. The shoulder scar, the worn hooves that spoke of endless miles on hard ground, the hollow muscle from overwork. Even the way the horse held his head alert, proud, but dulled by hardship. Ethan closed the book and looked out the window. Dust Devil stood under the makeshift shelter, head bowed in the dark. Ethan whispered to the silence, "We won't let them forget you." Not again. Near midnight, a new sound stirred the yard and the sharp clatter of hooves on the dirt road. Ethan rose quickly, hand brushing the handle of his knife before he moved to the door. A single rider approached, cloak fluttering in the night wind. It was Abigail McGraw. She swung down from her bay mare and pulled a cloth bundle from her saddle. Her face was pale but determined, her eyes meeting Ethan's with a mixture of defiance and unease. "I need to see him," she said simply. Ethan hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered, moving straight toward the shelter where Dust Devil lifted his head at her approach. From the bundle, she drew 3 objects, a worn horse brush with the name Lorna carved into the wood, a small jar of ointment sealed with wax, and an old leather saddle scuffed but lovingly stitched with floral patterns. "These belong to my mother," Abigail said softly. Her hand trembled as she reached out, brushing the gray horse's neck. She used this brush on him every evening, and this salve, she swore by it whenever he strained himself. Her voice cracked. The saddle was hers too. It always fit him just right. She whispered, "Dust Devil." The horse flicked an ear, nostrils flaring. He shifted closer, pressing lightly against her palm. Abigail's eyes filled with tears. They stood in the dim light, and Abigail began to speak her words, spilling like a confession long held back. My mother used to call him her gentle whirlwind. Said he only ran his hardest when she was riding, as if he knew no one else deserved that gift. I was a child, but I remember every gallop felt like flying. Her face hardened. When she died, I begged my father to keep him. But he just said, "I won't keep anything that makes me remember." And that was it. Dust Devil was gone. I thought maybe he'd found another rider, someone who cared. I never imagined this. Her eyes traced the scars, the ribs, the weary frame. Anger flared beneath her grief. Ethan spoke gently. I didn't know who he was, but I could tell he still carries something. Something not broken yet. For the first time, Abigail looked at Ethan not with suspicion, but with recognition. The following evening they gathered again, Ethan, Abigail, and Hank Dawson, who had returned at Abigail's request. The three stood in the yard, while wind rattled the tin roof and the lantern lights swayed. Dust Devil shifted inside the pen, his eyes following them. Hank took his pipe from his mouth. He might never be what he was, he said, but he sure as hell ain't done. I can see it in the way he stands waiting for someone to believe in him. Abigail touched the saddle in her arms. I can't ride him. I'm no cowboy. But I want to help. I owe it to my mother. And to him. Ethan nodded slowly. Then we'll do it together. If we're going to bring him back, the rodeo is the place. That's where he'll shine again. The air grew still as the unspoken pact settled between them. Hank would guide the recovery, teaching Ethan how to rebuild strength without breaking what was left. Abigail would supply whatever she could, her mother's tools, her father's hidden stores of medicine, if she dared steal them. And Ethan would carry the weight in the saddle. They didn't shake hands. They didn't need to. The understanding was enough. Later that night, Ethan took the old brush in his hands. The letters of Lorna were worn smooth, but still clear. He began to stroke Dust Devil's coat, long gentle sweeps that lifted dust and dirt, revealing a sheen beneath. The horse leaned into the motion, eyes half closed. Abigail lit a lantern and set it near the pen, the golden glow casting warmth across the clearing. Hank sat under the mesquite tree pipe smoke drifting upward, his gaze fixed on the horse as though watching an old friend return. With each stroke, the gray coat brightened, catching the lamplight. Dust Devil shivered, shook himself, and swished his tail. For the first time, his eyes no longer looked hollow, but alive. That night, under the patchwork canvas roof, a broken horse was touched not by pity, but by belief. And in the quiet rustle of brush bristles, a truth settled. Deep legends do not die. They only wait to be remembered. The morning broke clear and sharp, the kind of desert light that seemed to lace every flaw bare. Ethan had just finished filling a bucket when the crunch of boots on gravel made him glance up. Hank Dawson was already striding across the yard, an old leather satchel slung over one shoulder. The veteran cowboy had the gait of a man who'd lived half his life in the saddle, and the other half patching the injuries that came from it. Mourning Hank muttered, setting the satchel down by the pen. He opened it to reveal bandages, a jar of pungent salve strips of linen, and a bone-handled knife worn smooth by time. Let's see what we're dealing with. Dust Devil flicked an ear, eyeing him warily. Hank moved with a calm efficiency that spoke of decades handling animals too proud to be broken by harshness. He tied a loose lead to the post enough to steady the horse, but not trap him, then crouched by the hind leg. Easy boy, Hank murmured, running a hand along the cannon bone. His fingers pressed gently at the fetlock, then higher into the muscled tendon of the hock. Dust Devil twitched, shifting his weight, but didn't lash out. Hank pressed once more, firmer this time. The horse jerked slightly, ears pinning, then settled. There it is, Hank said grimly, rising to his feet. Chronic tendon strain. Old. Not a full tear, thank God, but it never healed right. That's why he limps when the ground gets uneven. He met Ethan's eyes, then Abigail's, who stood silent with her arms crossed tightly. Here's the truth. With the right care, he might still run. But it's risky. One wrong step, one stumble, and he won't get up again. Ethan stood very still, the weight of the words pressing heavy. After a long silence, he gave a single nod. We don't let him stumble. They spread Hank's notes on the table inside the cabin. The old cowboy's handwriting scratched across scraps of paper diagrams, sketched in charcoal. Walking slow and steady every morning, Hank said, keeps the tendon loose without tearing it further. No galloping, not yet. He tapped a crude drawing of a horse's leg. You'll want mud packs from Clay Ridge. Warm mineral clay they'll draw heat out and ease swelling. Apply each night. He scribbled a list. An herbs mugwort, wild mint comfrey root. Brew a tea-soaked linen strips and bind the leg. Change it daily. Abigail, think you can fetch the herbs every few days? Abigail, who had been listening in silence, finally nodded. I know where the comfrey grows. By the creek bend. Ethan pulled his notebook closer, copying Hank's words, sketching the placement of the packs, noting times of rest and feed. He had filled pages before the lesson ended his pencil, pressing hard into the paper. When Hank shut his satchel, his voice softened. This isn't easy work. Some men won't even try it. Takes more patience than pride. But you've got grit, Cole. That might be enough. By evening, Ethan had made his decision. He returned from town empty-handed of day wages, dust on his boots, but no coins in his pocket. Martha was waiting by the stove ladle in hand, her lined face sharp with suspicion. You turned down 2 jobs today, she said flatly. One driving cattle, one leading a string up to Red Bluff. Why, Ethan set his hat on the peg eyes steady. Because I can't leave him. Not now. Every hour matters if he's to heal. Her lips tightened. We don't eat on good intentions, Ethan. We eat on dollars. I know, he said quietly. But if I walk away, then every step I've taken since I led him here means nothing. For a long moment, Martha's gaze bored into him. Then with a weary sigh, she reached for a small tin box hidden on the shelf. She opened it, revealing only a few crumpled bills and coins, $3 left from years of scraping by. She pressed it into his hand. Then take it. And take care of him, she said softly. But don't you dare fall apart halfway through. Ethan closed his fingers around the coins, throat tight. I won't. Dawn after dawn, Ethan rose before the sun burned the desert sky red. He heated water over the fire, mixed it with clay, until it formed a heavy, warm paste and spread it across the swollen tendon. At first, Dust Devil flinched at the touch, shifting and snorting. By the second day, the horse stood calmer, ears flicking, as if he recognized the strange ritual for what it was, relief. Each afternoon, Ethan counted out 200 steps along the meadow path, leading Dust Devil slowly, never hurrying. 1, 2, 3. His voice was low, steady, a mantra, both for the horse and himself. He wrote in the notebook every night. Day 5, steps smoother. No hitch in the right hind, eyes brighter. Abigail came often bringing small sacks of barley mash sprinkled with sea salt, a delicacy stolen from her father's kitchens. She watched silently as Ethan worked, sometimes kneeling to steady the bandage while he tied it. Hank appeared every other day, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Wrap higher, he'd grunt, or don't pull so tight. But after the corrections, he'd nod with grudging approval. You're doing what most doctors won't risk. Keep at it. The work was backbreaking, repetitive, and thankless. Yet with every sunrise, Dust Devil's coat shone a little more. His steps steadied, his gaze lifted. It was high noon when Clint McGraw rode into the yard without a word of greeting. His stallion stamped and tossed its head, the sun flashing off Clint's polished spurs. Ethan looked up from where he was adjusting the bandage on Dust Devil's leg. Clint's eyes swept the makeshift corral, the neat wrappings on the gray horse's leg, the bucket of fresh oats. His mouth curled. You're wasting your time, Clint said, voice carrying like a whip crack. That animal isn't worth the bullet it'd take to put him down. Ethan rose slowly, the lead rope still in his hand. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "With respect, sir, that's my choice." Clint leaned forward in the saddle, sneering. "I hear you're planning to ride him in the rodeo?" That true Ethan met his gaze without blinking. "If he's willing, I'll ride him." A short, harsh laugh. "Then you'll make every man in town laugh till their sides split. You'll be the joke of Dusty Creek." Clint wheeled his horse sharply and spurred away, dust rising in his wake. From the cabin window, Martha watched, her knuckles white around the dishcloth. She held fury and fear mingling in her eyes. That night, under a sky scattered thick with stars, Ethan sat on the ground beside the pen. The desert was silent, but for the chirp of crickets and the occasional sigh of wind through mesquite branches. Dust Devil stood loose within the circle of rope, unbound, free to move. Yet he stayed close, ears turned toward Ethan. The young man leaned against the post, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't need you to win. I just need you to try with me. That's all." For a moment, the horse was still. Then Dust Devil stepped forward, lowering his great head until his muzzle brushed Ethan's shoulder. With a soft grunt, he rested his weight there, brief but unmistakable. Ethan froze, then laughed quietly, the sound breaking free after weeks of strain. His hand rose to stroke the silvered neck. "Thank you," he murmured, more to himself than the horse. "That's all I needed." Above them, the stars burned steady, as if bearing silent witness to the fragile but unbreakable bond that was taking shape, a bond not of dominance, but of trust. The week before the rodeo, Dusty Creek seemed to hum with a single rumor carried on every porch conversation, hammered out between sparks in the blacksmith shop, and traded over whiskey glasses in the Red Horn Saloon. Ethan Cole and that broken-down horse of his. By the second day, the story had spread so far and twisted so much that it hardly resembled truth. Some swore Dust Devil could barely walk to the water trough without stumbling. Others claimed Ethan had lost his mind, chasing ghosts of glory that were long gone. At the Red Horn, men laughed until tears ran down their faces, and someone chalked a fresh line onto the betting board. Round 1, Ethan Cole. Odds 1 to 25, fall with draw or carried out. Beneath it, another hand scrawled in chalk, Old Bones, with a saddle. The name stuck. Even at the market, Martha Cole couldn't escape it. One fishmonger, smirking as he wrapped up her order, muttered, "Tell your boy not to embarrass himself, Miss Cole. Some things are better left in the dirt." Martha tightened her jaw and said nothing. When Ethan passed by a group of loafers on the boardwalk, he heard them laughing, their voices cutting sharp as whips Cole's betting on a corpse with hooves. He didn't answer. He only tipped his hat low and walked home in silence, the words heavy, but not enough to break him. That evening, as Ethan crouched by the pen, scraping mud from Dust Devil's leg, two shadows appeared at the gate. Billy Joe and Pete, men who lived for smoke-filled card games and backroom wagers, leaned casually against the post, smirks already on their faces. Billy Joe slapped a bulging wallet against his palm. "Ethan, you're a smart fellow. Smarter than this foolishness anyway. Why not take $20, walk away, and let everyone save face?" Pete chimed in, shaking his head, as if pitying him. "You don't even have money for proper tack. Hell, you'll be lucky if that saddle of yours holds together on the first turn." Ethan rose slowly, dusting his hands on his trousers. His eyes met theirs without wavering. "I don't need a new saddle. I need a horse that wants to run. And I've already got one." Billy Joe chuckled. "We've got $50 down that you'll eat dirt in the first round. All I'm saying is, why not cash in before you break your neck? Better to walk away rich than crawl away broke." Ethan's voice stayed calm but firm. You boys place bets hoping I'll fall. I place my life on standing up. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Billy Joe finally shrugged, pocketing the wallet. Don't say I didn't make you a fair offer. With that, the two melted back toward town, leaving only the sound of Dust Devil's steady breath behind. That night, the desert lay still. Ethan and his mother sat side by side on the porch, the warm glow of a lantern painting their faces gold. Martha's hands rested in her lap, knotted with years of work, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Do you think I should quit?" Ethan asked quietly. For a long time, she didn't answer. Then she sighed, voice carrying both weariness and pride. "Money runs out, Ethan. Always has, always will. But chances to prove who you are, those don't come often." He followed her gaze toward the corral. Dust Devil stood beneath the stars, half asleep, ears twitching at unseen sounds. Ethan felt a swell of something deep and certain. "I've never believed in myself as much as I do now. Not until him." Martha placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch light but steady. "Then don't let anyone buy that belief off you, not for $20, not for $200. The next morning, Ethan made his way into town to scavenge a few worn horseshoes from the forge. The shop was hot, the air thick with iron and smoke. Inside, Jed Baker stood at the counter pouring himself a tin cup of tea. Ethan stiffened, but before he could turn away, Jed spoke. "That horse of yours once belonged to the finest woman this town ever saw." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And you turned him into a beast of burden." Jed's swallowed eyes shadowed. "I followed orders from your benefactor's father. But I never said I stopped you from healing him." For the first time, Ethan heard something in Jed's voice that wasn't cruelty or scorn. Regret, maybe. It unsettled him more than anger would have. He left without replying, but the words followed him down the street like ghosts. That night, a soft knock came at the stable door. Abigail stood there, holding a bundle wrapped in cloth. She stepped inside her lantern, throwing a warm circle of light. "This belonged to my mother," she said, setting the bundle on a bale of hay. Inside lay a set of tack bridle reins, breast collar, all hand-stitched leather, the patterns faint, but still beautiful. She ran her hand over it reverently. It was made for Dust Devil. He deserves to have it again. Ethan hesitated. "If your father finds out," Abigail's voice cut firm. "He lost any claim to this horse the day he cast him aside. This isn't his. It never was." Ethan touched the worn leather, feeling the craftsmanship beneath his fingertips. His throat tightened. "Then I'll use it. Not to shame your family, but to help him take back what was stolen." Their eyes met, a quiet agreement passing between them, unspoken, but sure. On the eve of the rodeo, the ranch lay in deep silence. The stars spread endless and cold across the sky. Inside his small room, Ethan sat by the window, notebook open on his lap. His pencil scratched across the paper, day -7. "They wager on my failure. I wager on loyalty. I don't know if victory waits for us, but I do know this: we will not quit." He closed the book gently, blew out the lamp, and lay back on the narrow bed. Through the thin walls, he could hear Dust Devil shifting and the corral hooves brushing against earth. It was a steady living sound, a promise in the dark. Sleep came slow, but it came with a calmness Ethan had not felt in years. The first light of dawn had barely broken when Dusty Creek began to stir like a hive kicked awake. Wagons rolled in from the surrounding ranches, their wheels grinding the dry earth to powder. By 6 o'clock, a river of townsfolk already streamed toward the wide fenced arena at the edge of town. Banners snapped in the wind, red, white, and blue cloth strung between posts. Drums thudded from a local marching band, their rhythm answered by the twang of fiddles and guitars warming up on the makeshift stage. Vendors fired up griddles, the smell of frying dough and roasted corn mixing with the dust kicked up by boots. Children scampered along the railings, some daring to climb high enough that their mothers shrieked and pulled them down. Women arrived in embroidered dresses, crimson skirts brushing the dirt bonnets pinned with fake roses. Men jostled for space along the wooden fence, their hats tipped forward, their spurs clinking with every step. At the entrance, a fresh board displayed the names of this year's competitors. Near the top, in bold chalk letters, was Sam Carter, last year's champion known for his flawless runs and his golden Palomino stallion. The horse Sunfire was as sleek and blinding as a blade in the sun. But lower down, scrawled in smaller hand, was another name that drew murmurs through the crowd: Ethan Cole. Dust Devil. Laughter followed the sight. Some shook their heads, muttering fool's errand, others already laying money on how quickly the boy would fall. Near the announcer's booth, the veteran caller snorted and leaned toward his companion. "A lame horse in the barrels, Lord. I've seen some oddities. But this will be a story folk laugh about for years." At the betting table, Billy Joe and Pete worked like carnival barkers, their voices booming above the noise. "Who's got the guts? Odds are 1 to 30. He lasts more than 10 seconds. Easy money. Step right up." Coins clattered, bills changed hands. Hope was scarce, but mockery was abundant. Martha Cole found a seat near the far end of the wooden bleachers. She clutched her bonnet tight in her lap, her heart racing so loud she could hardly hear the music. Her boy was out there now, and nothing she could do would shield him from the eyes of this town. A hush rippled briefly across the staging pen when Ethan Cole appeared at last, leading Dust Devil by the reins. The young cowboy wore no fine new suit, no tailored boots. Only a freshly washed white shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, a faded scarf tied loose at his throat, and the same patched leather boots he'd worn all season. His hands looked steady. His jaw was set. Beside him, Dust Devil moved slowly, each step deliberate. The horse no longer limped, though a faint tightness lingered in the right hind leg. Yet his head was high, his ears flicking sharp, his coat brushed to a muted silver sheen. Abigail's tack gleamed faintly, the carved patterns catching the sunlight like old memories returning to life. A wave of laughter rose from the rails. "Look, their stone statue come to life," someone hollered. "Perfect, let him trot one lap for pity's sake before he keels over," another barked. Ethan ignored them all. He pressed his brow against Dust Devil's for a breath, his lips moving low enough that no one else could hear. "We ride for us," he whispered. "Not for them." The horse's ear twitched as if understanding. Up in the shaded grandstand, Clint McGraw lounged in the front row of the VIP section, silver-topped cane resting across his knees. His mustache twitched with amusement when he caught sight of Dust Devil entering the field. Beside him, Abigail strode forward, chin lifted. She didn't greet him, her eyes fixed on the ring. "You know whose horse that is," she said quietly. Clint didn't turn. "That's no horse. That's a shadow. And by midday, it'll collapse under this sun." Abigail's voice sharpened. "That was my mother's horse. You left him to rot just as you left her in her last days." The words struck like a lash. Several townsfolk nearby shifted uncomfortably, casting sidelong looks at the powerful rancher. Clint's jaw tightened. His hand clenched around the cane's handle. Still, he said nothing. Abigail leaned closer, her tone fierce but quiet enough that only he could hear. "Whatever happens today, you don't own his fate anymore." For the first time, Clint lowered his eyes. He swallowed, looked away, and raised his binoculars again, though his grip betrayed the tension in his knuckles. The announcer's booming voice echoed across the arena, calling riders out one by one. First came Sam Carter, tall in the saddle, his palomino shining like polished brass. Sunfire tossed his mane, pawed the dirt, and drew a cheer from the stands. Carter tipped his hat arrogantly, enjoying the wave of admiration. Behind him, the other competitors paraded in a line of youthful cowboys and polished horses. Their tack gleamed with fresh stitching, their boots unscuffed, their animals sleek from weeks of professional training. Last came Ethan and Dust Devil. The hush was palpable, followed by uneasy chuckles. Someone muttered "Gray Mule" in a parade of stallions. Others hooted. Looks like he dug that horse out of the glue factory. But Hank Dawson, standing at the edge of the rails, leaned on his cane and gave the faintest nod. His voice, though quiet, carried conviction. That's the right frame. He's got it. Dust Devil's ears flicked toward the sound, as if recognizing the old cowboy's approval. The sun climbed higher, painting the arena gold. Dust swirled around the rails as the crowd pressed closer, eager to see the contest begin. For many, it was already decided Ethan Cole would be the day's biggest joke. But for a handful, Abigail, Hank, and Martha, it was something else entirely. It was the moment Dust Devil stepped back into the light. The air inside the Dusty Creek rodeo grounds felt like it could snap with tension. The sun rode high now, beating down on the churned dirt of the arena until heat shimmered above it like smoke. The bleachers were packed shoulder to shoulder, every man, woman, and child leaning forward, waiting for the event that would crown the afternoon. The announcer's voice thundered over the crackling loudspeakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the semifinal round of today's competition. This ain't no ordinary trial. It's the three-part gauntlet. A roar swept through the stands. That's right. He continued, savoring the build-up. Each rider and horse will face 3 challenges back-to-back, with just one clock ticking. Barrel racing, cattle penning, and a straight sprint to the finish. 5 minutes total. The fastest time, cleanest runs wins the day. The crowd whistled, clapped, stomped boots. A few waved hats in the air. On the chalkboard tally, Sam Carter's name was circled and underlined in red, the betting favorite. His palomino Sunfire gleamed like pure coin under the sun, every inch the champion. And then further down the list, written in smaller letters, but carrying more whispers than any other name, Ethan Cole, Dust Devil. Half the crowd leaned forward out of morbid curiosity, itching to see the crippled horse stumble in public. They muttered "glue bag, walking bones, old mule." But the other half had grown quieter. After the preliminary rounds, after watching the boy and that battered gray mount keep standing when they should have collapsed, something strange was taking root in the murmurs. Not hope exactly, but wonder. What if... By the rail, Abigail gripped her mother's embroidered handkerchief so tightly the stitching pressed into her skin. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath until Hank Dawson's voice rumbled at her elbow. He didn't look at her, only at the horse and rider waiting by the gate. "You don't need to run like the devil it once was," he said softly. "It just needs to remember it ever was." Abigail swallowed hard and nodded. Dust Devil flicked an ear as if he'd heard. The flag dropped. Ethan leaned forward in the saddle, one hand gripping the worn leather reins, the other brushing Dust Devil's neck. "Go!" It wasn't a yell, not even a command. Just a word between partners. Dust Devil surged. Not like Sunfire, not like a young colt blasting out of a pen, but steady firm like a river bursting past a dam. His hooves struck the dirt with a rhythm that grew tighter, sharper, until they reached the first barrel. The crowd braced for the stumble, for the sag of a ruined leg. It didn't come. The gray horse bent low, sweeping around the post as if drawn on an invisible string. Ethan's body leaned with him, hand-loose eyes fixed on the next barrel. A ripple went through the crowd. Second barrel. Dust Devil's breathing grew rougher, chest expanding hard, but his footing held. He hugged the turn close, barely an inch between flank and barrel. Dirt sprayed into the air. A child in the front row gasped, then started clapping. Third barrel. The old injury showed a faint hitch, the right hind slipping half a beat, but Ethan had already shifted, dropping his weight into the stirrup, guiding balance back. Horse and rider moved like a hinge, closing the turn, smooth as silk. The announcer's voice cracked in disbelief. Well, that old gray ain't just standing, it's dancing. They thundered past the last marker's straight line to the buzzer. The timer clicked. 1 minute, 38 seconds. Not the fastest run, not even close to Carter's blistering 1:20. But clean, flawless, not a single barrel touched. For a long breath, the stands were silent, caught between disbelief and awe. Then the applause came, not thunderous, but scattered, sincere and growing. Ethan stroked Dust Devil's neck, whispering something no one else could hear. The horse flicked his tail nostrils, flaring as if proud. Next challenge, the announcer called, voice almost breathless. 4 head of cattle into the pen. Clock still running, Dust Devil shifted muscles bunching as the gate to the small herd swung open. 6 rangy steers burst into the wider arena, hooves drumming, eyes rolling white. Ethan tightened the reins and nudged the gelding forward. Dust Devil's ears went back for a moment, a faint hesitation flickering in his stride. He faltered almost as though confusion pulled him sideways. From the stands, Martha's hands flew to her mouth. He's seizing up, she whispered. But Hank only folded his arms, eyes narrowing. No. Let him remember. Down below, Ethan sat still patient, waiting for the horse to decide. He didn't kick, didn't shout, didn't force. He just held the line steady. And then something shifted. Dust Devil's neck arched, a rumble rising from his chest. His eyes sharpened, his body angled. This wasn't barrel racing anymore. This was something older, etched in the muscles of a working horse. He lunged. Not wildly, not fast, but deliberate. The nearest steer balked, turning away. Dust Devil swung sideways, blocking the gap, herding with the precision of a shepherd dog. 1 step forward, 2 steps back flank, pressing the air, until the cow turned exactly where he wanted. The crowd murmured, then louder still. Another steer tried to break. Dust Devil wheeled, almost sitting on his haunches, as he cut the animal off, dust flying up in clouds. His tail lashed his ears, pinned his whole frame alive with purpose. Good Lord, someone breathed. That's not a racehorse. That's a ranch horse. In the grandstand, Clint McGraw's jaw tightened as he watched his late wife's horse move with a brilliance he'd once ignored. The steers bunched, confused, panicked, exactly where Dust Devil wanted them. Ethan dropped his hand and gave the cue, and the gelding drove them forward in a sweeping arc. 1 minute and 10 seconds later, the 4th cow barreled through the gate of the pen. The latch clanged shut. The arena erupted. This time it wasn't scattered applause. It was cheering, whistling boots, hammering wood. People stood, hats waving, as the old gray horse threw up his head and snorted like thunder. By the betting booth, Pete leaned hard on the rail, his face pale. I thought he was just a barrel runner, he muttered. The hush that fell over Dusty Creek's rodeo grounds was unlike anything anyone could remember. Hours of noise and laughter and taunts had evaporated, leaving the air taut as a bowstring. Even the children sat still, eyes fixed on the starting line. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath. The judge raised his hand voice, carrying across the arena. Final round. Straight sprint. 300 meters dirt packed. 2 riders left. On one side, Sam Carter adjusted his gloves with the casual confidence of a reigning champion. Beneath him stood Golden Smoke, a thoroughbred cross built for speed legs, long flanks quivering with anticipation, coat gleaming like molten gold. On the other side, Ethan rested one hand on the weathered reins, the other smoothing the coarse gray mane of Dust Devil. The old gelding pawed once at the ground, ears twitching, waiting for his rider's signal. Ethan leaned close, whispering into the horse's ear. "We don't need to win every fight," he murmured. "Just this one." From the rail, Hank Dawson stood with arms, folded eyes, hard and steady. Martha clutched the wooden cross that had hung in her kitchen for 30 years, her lips moving soundlessly. And Abigail pressed her mother's handkerchief to her mouth, her eyes burning holes through the track. The flag dropped. Both horses lunged forward. The crowd roared as Golden Smoke surged ahead instantly, his stride smooth and effortless, muscles rippling like coiled wire. Within seconds, Sam had carved out a clear lead, 1 full length ahead of the gray gelding. Dust Devil did not chase. His gait settled into a steady rhythm, hooves striking the dirt with even precision. He ran not like a colt desperate to prove himself, but like an old soldier measuring the battlefield. Sam twisted in the saddle, smirk tugging at his lips. "That all you got?" he shouted over the pounding of hooves. Ethan said nothing. He held the reins lightly, posture calm, eyes fixed forward. He didn't strike Dust Devil with spurs, didn't crack a whip, didn't demand. He trusted. In the stands, the crowd began to chant for the favorite. "Faster, Golden Smoke's got it." Pete leaned over the betting rail, smug grin spreading. "Told you he's out of gas. Just watch." But Hank's mouth curved into the faintest smile. He muttered under his breath, "Not yet." A third of the way down the track, Golden Smoke was still in the lead tail, streaming like a banner. Sam urged him harder, crouching low, spurring for more speed. The horse responded, stretching out dirt flying from his hooves. But behind Dust Devil's stride began to change. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, guiding with the subtlest pressure of his knee. The gelding's breathing deepened, legs churning more powerfully. Each stride struck with more certainty, more drive. The gap shrank from a full length to 3/4, from 3/4 to half. The crowd felt it. The chants grew ragged, disbelieving. Hats lifted in the air. Children stood on the rails screaming. Abigail clutched the wood so hard her knuckles whitened. She broke into a cry that carried over the noise. "Keep going, old friend. She's watching you, Martha." Trembling pressed her cross tighter to her lips, whispering prayers through tears. Dust Devil pushed harder. The gray gelding's head stretched forward, nostrils wide, eyes blazing with something fierce, something remembered. By the halfway mark, he was just half a length behind Golden Smoke. The arena was no longer divided between believers and doubters. Now it was one throbbing, screaming voice of disbelief. The last bend approached the place where the dirt track tilted ever so slightly, where footing turned treacherous. Sam knew the spot. He pushed Golden Smoke, forcing the colt to dig in. The young horse launched, but his hind hoof slipped against the uneven ground, faltering just a heartbeat. It was enough. Ethan leaned low, his cheek brushing Dust Devil's mane. His voice carried only for the horse. "She's watching us, partner. Right now." Something in the old gelding shifted. A sound like thunder cracked from his chest, a deep, guttural snort that seemed to rip through the years. His stride lengthened, the power in his hindquarters exploding. The dirt beneath him scattered in sprays, every hoofbeat a hammer. The gray horse surged. Golden Smoke's head was suddenly at his flank, then his shoulder, then level with his eye. Sam whipped his rain shock, flashing in his gaze as he realized the impossible was happening. Dust Devil stormed past Maine, lashing scars, forgotten, carrying Ethan with him as though time itself had turned backward. The crowd went berserk. People leapt to their feet, hats flying, voices breaking with shouts. The sound of hooves pounded against their chests like war drums. 50 meters left. The two horses were side by side. Then Dust Devil inched ahead. Then a half length. Ethan's lips moved one last time. Together. They crossed the line in a storm of dust and noise. Dust Devil's hooves slammed the packed dirt one final time as the red flag at the finish whipped through the air. The whistle shrieked, and the old gray gelding crossed first by half a length. The arena exploded. Men who had bet against him tore their slips to shreds. Women wept openly. Children screamed the horse's name, though they had never spoken it before. The bleachers shook beneath the stomping of boots. Hank yanked his hat into the air, voice booming above the chaos. "Who's laughing about a lame horse now?" Abigail's tears streamed unchecked as she clutched the railing. "Mama, he did it. He really did it." Sam Carter slid off Golden Smoke, stunned into silence. For a long moment, he only stared at the dust settling around him. Then he lifted his chin, walked across the finish, and gave Ethan a single sharp nod of respect. Ethan, still in the saddle, bowed his head against Dust Devil's neck, arms wrapping around the gelding's scarred head. He didn't cheer. He didn't raise his arms. He simply held on, eyes closed, his shoulders trembling. The announcer's voice cracked with emotion. Final results: Dusty Creek Rodeo, 1879. Winner Ethan Cole. Riding Dust Devil, Billy Joe and Pete abandoned the betting board, scattering before anyone could collect. They melted into the crowd, faces dark. From the back, Clint McGraw stood with arms at his sides, watching. He did not clap, he did not shout, but his eyes, hard as stone for years, flickered with something close to grief. Then he turned and disappeared. The townsfolk surged closer, spilling from the stands surrounding horse and rider. For the first time since he'd come to Dusty Creek, they called Ethan's name not as a punchline, but with respect. Ethan Cole, Dust Devil. The noise of the rodeo still echoed across Dusty Creek when Ethan slid from the saddle. Dust Devil's flanks trembled with every breath, sides heaving as though the last 300 yards had carved years off his life. His head sagged low, sweat streaking down the gray coat nostrils, flaring wide. Abigail was the first to reach them, pushing past a knot of cheering townsfolk who wanted to pat Ethan's back or touch the victorious horse. She dropped to her knees in the dirt, both hands against Dust Devil's muzzle, her cheek pressed to the sweat-dampened hair between his eyes. "You promised me," she whispered fiercely. "You promised we wouldn't push him again." Ethan laid a hand on the gelding's quivering shoulder. His voice was soft, roughened with emotion. "It's done now, Abigail. He gave everything he had, and that's enough." A young veterinarian in a dust-stained vest approached cautiously, kneeling beside the horse's hind leg. His fingers traced the swelling already visible around the old scar tissue. He glanced up, concern etched across his features. The tendons flared again. "He needs rest, and soon." Ethan only nodded. He had seen it the instant Dust Devil launched into that impossible final sprint, the way the old injury strained under the sudden surge of power. He pressed his forehead briefly to the horse's neck, murmuring, "Easy, partner. We're done fighting." Dust Devil let out a long sigh, as if in agreement, and leaned the weight of his head into Ethan's chest. The rider wrapped both arms around him, holding on as the roar of the arena faded into something distant and unimportant. When the crowd began to drift away, Hank Dawson appeared carrying his worn leather satchel. The old wrangler knelt his calloused hands, moving with the quiet confidence of decades spent reading horses like books. He bent Dust Devil's leg, tested the joint, and listened with his fingertips. Finally, he straightened and met Ethan's eyes. The old tendon stretched to its limit. Didn't snap but another race like that, and... Hank shook his head slowly. He'd never walk straight again. Ethan's jaw tightened, but there was no regret in his eyes. "Will he recover with time?" Hank said. 6 months, maybe more. Good feed, soft pasture, steady care. He'll live a sound life. But racing, those days are finished. Ethan turned to Dust Devil, stroking the length of his neck. Strangely, there was no sorrow in the horse's gaze, only calm, a quiet dignity earned at last. The war was over. The stands had emptied, the vendors gone silent when Ethan saw him. Clint McGraw moved through the thinning crowd like a shadow hat brim, low strides, slower than usual. Abigail rose instinctively, stepping between him and Ethan. Clint raised one hand. His voice carried none of its usual steel. "Abigail, let me speak to him." She hesitated, searching her father's eyes. Then, with reluctance, she stepped aside. Clint stopped a few feet from Ethan. For a long moment, he said nothing, only looking at the gray gelding that leaned wearily against his rider. In those eyes, Ethan glimpsed something unexpected, not pride, not power, but memory, painful, unshakable memory. At last, Clint spoke, his voice rough. "I owe you 2 things. A thank you and an apology." Ethan's brow furrowed. Clint continued, forcing the words out like stones. "When I put that horse in your hands, it wasn't just a cruel joke. It was me trying to rid myself of a ghost I didn't know how to face." Ethan's reply was quiet but firm. "That wasn't a ghost. That was a living soul." Clint's shoulders sagged. He lowered his gaze to the dirt. "And I let grief blind me until I couldn't see the difference." Clint's voice cracked as he went on, the veneer of control crumbling. "My wife, Abigail's mother, she used to say Dust Devil wasn't just a horse. He was her companion, her other heartbeat. When she died, I couldn't look at him without feeling the ground ripped out from under me. So I shut him away, harnessed him, turned him into nothing." Ethan's eyes hardened. A draft animal when he should have been free, Clint nodded, fists clenching at his side. "Yes, because I couldn't bear to see what he reminded me of. Cowardice, that's what it was. But when I saw you ride him today, I didn't see a poor cowboy. I saw myself, the man I should have been." Slowly, Clint reached out his hand, trembling, and brushed Dust Devil's mane. For the first time in years, the horse didn't flinch. His ears flicked forward, calm. Clint swallowed hard. If he can forgive me, then maybe I can learn how to be a man again. Silence hung between them until Clint drew a deep breath. His voice steadied, though his eyes were rimmed red. "McGraw Ranch has barns full of horses, men who train them. But none of them carry what you do, Ethan, the patience, the trust." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You've got a dozen hired hands who know more tricks than I do." "Tricks," Clint said softly, "aren't the same as heart. You've got that, and I need it. Dust Devil needs it. Would you come to the ranch, work with me?" Abigail's breath caught. She glanced at Ethan, hope flickering across her face for the first time in years. Ethan studied Clint for a long moment, then looked down at the weary gelding leaning into him. He thought of his mother waiting at the far end of the stands, of the long empty nights he'd spent drifting from job to job. Finally, he nodded. "I won't promise forever, but I'll come." so long as this horse gets the rest he's earned." Clint exhaled shakily, something loosening in his chest. Abigail smiled through her tears. For the first time since her mother's death, the McGraw family stood not as fragments, but as something closer to whole. By the time the sun dipped westward, the town of Dusty Creek glowed in hues of copper and gold. A quiet had fallen over the streets, where hours earlier the roar of the rodeo had shaken the dust loose from every window pane. At McGraw Ranch, Dust Devil stood by the weathered railhead, lowered but peaceful, as if he finally belonged again. No longer the scorned gray nag dragged into the arena as a joke, he had become a symbol of resilience, of return. Ethan leaned against the fence, watching the gelding graze the twilight painting silver into his coat. He felt no triumph, only gratitude that the story hadn't ended in bitterness. From the porch of the big house, Clint McGraw emerged with a worn leather notebook tucked beneath his arm, and the old logbook his wife had once filled with careful notes on horse training. He did not stride like an owner giving orders, but like a man about to begin again, a student instead of a master. And as the fading light spilled through a break in the clouds, it seemed for one quiet instant that another presence lingered, watching from above. The smile of a woman gone, but never forgotten, blessing the strange, winding path that had brought horse rider and family back to one another. A week after the rodeo, a wagon rattled slowly up the road toward McGraw Ranch. The driver was Ethan Raines, loose in his hands, while beside him, Martha Cole sat upright, her traveling shawl pulled tightly against the wind. The wagon carried only the barest belongings, 2 trunks, a rocking chair, and a box of kitchen pans that had seen better years. Waiting at the ranch yard, Clint McGraw oversaw the final touches on a small cottage that had once been nothing more than a storage shed. He had ordered the ranch hands to patch the roof, sand the warped floorboards, and whitewash the walls. The place was simple, but the windows looked out toward the pasture where morning light spilled across the grass. When Martha stepped down, she hesitated. The vast sprawl of McGraw Ranch stretched before her like a kingdom corrals, barns, and wide paddocks bordered by rail fences. It was far removed from the cramped cabin she had clung to for years. She tightened her shawl, the ghost of worry clouding her face. "This is your world now, Ethan," she murmured. "Not mine." But when he guided her to the little cottage, opened the creaking door, let the smell of fresh pine boards wash through something shifted. A breeze carried in from the fields, warm with the scent of hay and open country. She set her hand against the windowsill, gazed out at the neat rows of stalls, and finally sighed. Perhaps, she admitted softly, this is where you were meant to be. From that morning forward, life settled into rhythm. Ethan rose at 5, long before the sun touched the ridge. He mucked stalls, checked hooves, and mixed feed with steady hands. Clint often watched from a distance, arms, crossed lips, pressed thin, as if on the edge of offering advice. But he never spoke, never interfered. Ethan had his way of working, and for once, Clint allowed it. One evening, as twilight washed the ranch in amber light, Clint admitted as much to his daughter. Standing beside Abigail on the porch, he muttered, "That boy, he's turning this place into something I hardly recognize. And I'm glad for it." Abigail never returned to the town after that week. Instead, she tied her hair back, rolled up her sleeves, and became Ethan's right hand. Officially, she was his assistant. In truth, she became his partner. She tended the mares and foals with the patience of someone rediscovering purpose. Martha taught her the old herbal remedies she'd learned from her grandmother, how to brew willow bark for swelling, how to crush comfrey leaves into poultices for bruises. Abigail carried the scents of mint and sage on her hands, moving easily between barn and cottage. Ethan showed her the subtle arts, how to read a hoof for the faintest crack, how to hold her breath and listen for the rhythm of a horse's lungs. He taught her to speak with her body instead of her voice, because a horse understood calm gestures better than shouted orders. And always Dust Devil lingered near whatever stall Abigail worked in. The old gelding watched her with quiet eyes, like a sentinel. One evening, as she brushed the gray mane smooth, she leaned close and whispered, "I know she's here watching. And I think she's proud of us, both of us." Dust Devil blew a soft breath through his nostrils, as though in answer. It was Ethan's idea to open the ranch gates to the children of Dusty Creek. Horses shouldn't be just for rodeos or ranch hands, he told Clint. They should teach responsibility, courage, kindness. At first, Clint was skeptical. This isn't a schoolhouse, Cole. It's a ranch. But when the first Saturday arrived, a line of children wound down the dirt road, blacksmith's sons with bare feet, quiet orphans clutching one another's hands, and even the overdressed children of merchants who wanted to ride like in the dime novels. By noon, Clint was laughing for the first time in months. "Lord help us," he muttered, "this place is about to sound like a playground." Ethan divided the day into lessons. Mornings were for chores, feeding mucking stalls, hauling water. The children learned that caring for a horse meant sweat and patience, not just glory in the saddle. Afternoons were for riding. The students practiced basic commands, guiding the gentler horses over low poles, learning to trust the animal beneath them. There were rules, strict but fair. Discipline mattered. Any child who ignored Ethan's orders or treated a horse roughly was given a simple punishment, an hour of brushing Dust Devil's coat until it gleamed. At first, some groaned. But soon they came to love the quiet sessions with the gray gelding, talking to him in whispers, as if he were an old teacher who never judged, only listened. By the end of the summer, every child in Dusty Creek spoke Dust Devil's name with reverence. He was not a relic anymore. He was a mentor. Dust Devil no longer carried riders in races or drove wagons. Instead, he took on a new calling, the teacher horse. Whenever a young colt arrived at the ranch, wild-eyed and trembling, Ethan placed him in a paddock with Dust Devil. The change was always the same. Within days, the unruly colt would calm, mimicking the old gelding's steady presence. "He doesn't do anything," Ethan told Abigail, once amused. "He just stands there." But somehow, that's enough. One skittish bay filly that once bolted at every clap of thunder now stood quiet as a lamb after 2 weeks beside Dust Devil. When Hank visited and watched this quiet miracle unfold, he shook his head in admiration. "Some warriors don't need weapons to lead," he said. Each afternoon, Ethan turned Dust Devil out into a private meadow, lush grass, a gentle stream, and the kind of peace the horse had never known in his youth. Children learned to end their lessons by bowing to him across the fence. Ethan would smile and remind them, "Respect your teacher before you leave." No one ever argued. In those golden evenings when Ethan and Abigail were busy with the children, Clint often walked alone to the old barn where Dust Devil rested. He carried a stool with him, set it by the stall, and laid his hat across his knee. His hands, once calloused by reins and ledgers, now lingered on the gelding's muzzle. And he would talk. He spoke of the fairground where he first met the woman who became his wife. He spoke of the stormy night when Dust Devil nearly died of fever, and how his wife had sat awake for 3 nights feeding him broth like a child. He spoke of her smile when Dust Devil won his first ribbon, her laughter when he kicked over a barrel out of mischief. The horse stood still, breathing slow, as if listening, or perhaps remembering. One evening, Abigail passed by and paused in the doorway. She meant to call out to remind her father that supper was ready, but she stopped. The sight before her held her still, the stern patriarchs of the ranch, bareheaded and soft-voiced, pouring his heart into the ear of an old horse. She didn't speak. She only watched, realizing that two old souls, one human, one equine, were carrying each other through grief toward healing. After the rodeo, life at McGraw Ranch moved in a steadier rhythm, and Ethan and Abigail fell into a pattern that seemed as natural as breathing. They spent their mornings and evenings together in the barn, caring for Dust Devil. Ethan crouched by the gelding's hooves, trimming and checking the old joints with patient fingers. Abigail stood close with a brush, pulling the tangles from his mane and rubbing ointments into his coat with quiet affection. The silence between them was never heavy. At first it was simply comfortable, but slowly it shifted into longer glances, into the kinds of stories people tell when they trust one another. Ethan spoke of his boyhood, of running wild across pastures until his father's shout pulled him home. Abigail shared memories of her mother, of a woman who hummed while she worked and believed Dust Devil was more family than animal. One morning, as the gelding flicked his tongue out after swallowing a mouthful of oats, Ethan chuckled. "Look at him. He's laughing at us." Abigail looked up startled, then smiled, warm and bright. It was the first time she had seen Ethan so unguarded, not the silent stoic, but a man willing to tease, to soften. And day after day, that softness deepened into something unspoken but undeniable. 3 years later, when the cottonwoods blazed gold and the air carried the cool promise of autumn, Ethan and Abigail stood beneath an arch woven with wildflowers on McGraw Ranch and exchanged vows. Martha sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Hank, dressed in his best shirt and a red tie, walked Abigail down the aisle in place of her father, steady and proud. Then came a ripple of delight from the guests as Dust Devil appeared at the end of the path. His back was a little bowed, his step slower, but his eyes shone as bright as they ever had. A ribbon bound his chest, and hanging from the small leather pouch strapped to his saddle was a velvet box. The children gasped, then laughed and clapped as the gelding walked with deliberate dignity to the couple. Ethan took the box, pressed his forehead to Dust Devil's, and whispered, "You brought me here, old friend." Later, as dusk lit the sky in copper and rose, Dust Devil grazed alone in his private pasture, watching over the ranch, the fresh stables, the young colts racing in play, the family forming in the glow of the homestead windows. He stood like a sentinel at peace. A year into their marriage, Ethan and Abigail took the dream further. They founded an organization that bore the gelding's name, Dust Devil Rescue Ranch. Its purpose was simple but urgent: to save, heal, and retrain the forgotten horses of Arizona. The broken-down cart pullers, the scarred rodeo stock, the foals abandoned on dry scrubland. For all of them, the ranch would be sanctuary. Clint, older now and content to step back from management, poured much of his wealth into the project. He ordered a long row of new stables, built each stall wide and open to sunlight, each padded with fresh shavings. Hank accepted the role of honorary advisor, grumbling good-naturedly that he was too old to shovel manure, but not too old to spot a lame hawk. Martha took her place, teaching volunteers the basics of equine first aid, how to clean wounds, how to wrap bandages with steady hands. Dust Devil himself no longer worked, but his spirit carried the enterprise. His profile, captured in a simple sketch, was carved onto the ranch's signboard. Beneath it ran the motto, "Champion in every heart, a friend who never gave up." The rescue ranch operated as a non-profit. Once a month, veterinarians came from Tucson to check every animal. Children from poor families paid nothing to learn how to ride or groom. Horses that healed were paired with homes or became therapy partners for children with special needs. At the opening ceremony, Ethan stood on the porch of the new barn, Dust Devil at his side, and told the crowd, "Not every horse was born to win races, but every horse deserves to be loved." The ranch grew into more than a shelter. It became the beating heart of Dusty Creek. Every year they hosted Hoof Day, when the gates swung wide and townsfolk poured in. Families brushed horses, children painted murals on the barn walls, and volunteers demonstrated how to clean tack or wrap a bandage. For some kids, it was their first time touching a horse. For others, it was the highlight of the season. Partnerships blossomed. The town's elementary school bussed classes out each spring. Veterans came in groups finding quiet therapy in the patient rhythm of grooming and riding. The state's Child Psychology Institute sent counselors to watch shy children open up in the company of horses. One group of children living with disabilities visited weekly. Among them was a frail girl named Liza, who rarely spoke. One afternoon, Dust Devil lowered his great head and brushed his lips against her forehead. Liza gasped and then whispered her first words in months. "He kissed me." The other children gathered around smiling as though they had witnessed a miracle. Education became the heart of the program. Kids learned to feed horses from their palms, to wrap a sprain, to read the language of ears and tails. They wrote letters too, leaving them in a wooden box outside Dust Devil's stall. Some were childish scribbles, others careful notes signed with devotion. One simply read, "To Mr. D. Devil, the bravest horse in the world." Time moved on, and Dust Devil aged with it. By 28, he had long outlived the average quarter horse. Yet every morning, Ethan still led him around the little lake behind the ranch. The gelding's step was slow but steady. His eyes, though clouded, still gleamed when the sun struck them. The vet declared him healthy for his years, though arthritis stiffened his gait. Abigail wrapped him in a wool blanket each winter night, tucking it gently around his legs as if he were a child. One summer afternoon, Ethan went to fetch him and found Dust Devil lying in his stall. The gelding's head rested on the straw, eyes open, breathing shallow. There was no panic, no struggle, only peace. Ethan knelt, pressed his hand against the familiar neck, and whispered, "We traveled farther than either of us ever dreamed, old friend." Dust Devil blinked once softly and closed his eyes. His body stilled. Ethan stayed there, head bowed, until the barn fell silent, except for the sigh of the wind. The next day, all work ceased. The gates closed, the flag on the ranch flew at half-staff. No order was given, yet the people of Dusty Creek arrived in droves, children, ranchers, veterans, townsfolk. They came because they had to, because Dust Devil had carried a piece of each of their hearts. Hank dug the grave himself with a spade. His hands blistered, but he refused a machine. "I won't let steel touch this warrior," he said. They laid Dust Devil beneath the cottonwood tree by the lake, the place where he had loved to stand and watch the sunsets. A simple wooden marker was hammered into the earth, carved by hand. Dust Devil, champion in every heart. Children laid flowers, sugar cubes, and folded letters at the grave. One boy, small and freckled, placed a tiny medal from a county fair riding contest atop the mound. "I won this because of him," the boy whispered. No one wailed. No one broke down. The only sounds were the wind in the branches and the soft whicker of young horses, as if they too bowed their heads. Years passed, but Dust Devil's name never faded. His story entered classrooms as part of the town's curriculum. Teachers spoke of perseverance, of kindness, of the strange second chances life sometimes offered. A documentary was filmed, first shown in Arizona, then across the western states. Other ranches adopted the Dust model, establishing rescues that followed the same principles: patience, dignity, and healing for horse and human alike. In Dusty Creek's museum, a glass case displayed Dust Devil's worn halter and the ribbon he had worn on Ethan and Abigail's wedding day. Children pressed their noses to the glass, whispering in awe. On a school trip, one girl tugged her mother's sleeve and pointed at the old photographs. "Is that horse real?" she asked. Her mother smiled, eyes glistening. "Yes. And if you learn to trust someone enough, sometimes miracles run beside you, just like Dust Devil did." And so the legend lived not only in stone, not only in memory, but in the way people treated their animals, their neighbors themselves. A horse once discarded as useless had become a symbol of love that never gave up, of a bond that carried generations forward. Dust Devil was gone, but in Dusty Creek and in the countless lives touched by his spirit, he would never truly leave.